How can we develop hope from a crisis? This is Jeff and Kathy Teichert with Love in Later Years, and this is Sunday Spirit Candy.
Yes, and today we're remembering 9/11. And I want to point out right at the beginning that divorces went down. The divorce rate went down during the Depression.
You wouldn't expect that.
No, you would think that, you hear about money problems being a source of a lot of trouble, but I think people viewed the forces arrayed against them in the outside world as bigger than the conflict in their home, and they pulled together. And our country did that after 9/11, and I was very proud of that. I mean, I don't know if you remember everybody singing God Bless America, and we were suddenly united by this cause that we wanted to prevent this kind of terrorism from ever happening again.
It was a sobering event.
It definitely was. And so I think one way to get hope from crisis is to pull together and realize that, a crisis can unite us. And so that's important. Secondly, I think about Todd Beamer. Some of you will know who he is and some certainly won't. But on Flight 93 going over Pennsylvania, you may remember there were some passengers that found out what was going on and took over that plane and caused it to crash in Pennsylvania rather than into the U.S. Capitol or the White House or some other highly populated building wherever that was headed. Todd Beamer found his way to an air phone, and he called 911, and they were able to bring in the FBI, and he told them what was happening on the plane, and they were able to tell him what was happening elsewhere in the country. And he knew that there were some passengers that said, we're not going to let this go down. We're not going to let this happen. And Todd knew that he was probably going to die. And as this call ended, he said, please do one thing for me. He said, you can remember my wife's name is Lisa because it's your name also, and Todd Beamer, and I want you to call her and let her know how much I love her and tell my kids how much I love them. And the emergency callers or receptionist said she would do that and did. And he said, and then the next thing he said was, let's roll. And of course, let's roll was quoted in the State of the Union by President Bush the next time he got up to speak to Congress. And
it's also the name of the book that his wife wrote about that experience.
Yeah, the name is Let's Roll. And so Todd Beamer was a hero that was created in one day and died that day. And heroes show us the nobility of the human spirit, the courage that we can summon when we're called upon to. And I hope I'm never called to die for a cause, but if I had to die for my wife and my kids, whatever, our country, I would do that. And I believe you would too. And it was moving to me when Kathy and I visited the 9/11 Memorial this summer, and it showed the names of all the people who had died on 9/11, and we happened into Todd Beamer's name.
And this was on the 4th of July.
On the 4th of July.
Yeah.
It was really cool to just sort of pay our respects a little bit at that time to heroes, firefighters, to Todd Beamer, to others on that flight in Pennsylvania that they took it over and wouldn't allow the terrorists to achieve their objectives.
So how do we find hope?
I think we find hope by pulling together and by seeing the nobility of the human spirit that is revealed in times of crisis.
Well, and I mentioned that it was sobering because I remember that feeling of our country when we were like, wow, we don't always have control over everything. But we really did pull together. And, we all have individual crises at times in our life, whether it's health or relationship, financial. There's all sorts of crises that we each face that we have the opportunity to decide how to handle.
Brigham Young was known to say that this people, the Latter-day Saints, have shown that they can handle adversity. And we had a lot of persecution in the early days of the church. He said, the real test will be prosperity, for they will become the most prosperous people on earth, which is true now. And so I think the test for all of us is sometimes how we handle prosperity, because we seem to be able to pull together in adversity, but our our country in times of prosperity has become pretty fractured, and you see lots of division. And
It's almost like
And
we
it
have to
worries me.
create problems because we don't have them.
right,
And I just want to mention that it seems like we're having a lot of faith crisis lately, and I think sometimes it's because we have such big opinions about things we can instead have peace about.
right,
Because God is God and He's still there for us. And so just think about that. If you're experiencing any kind of a faith crisis, we're not going to understand everything in this life, but we can have peace.
yeah. So let's remember those things, pull together, note the nobility and the human spirit that you see around you and the heroes that are created by crisis. And as Kathy just mentioned, trust in God and remember that things are going to be okay.
We're actually experiencing some wind, so I'm holding the camera. And yeah, that's perfect timing, isn't it?
And remember, any time is a great time for more love in your life, especially in a crisis.
Thanks so much for listening to Love in Later Years. And if you enjoy our Sunday Spirit Candy, subscribe to our YouTube channel.